A calm morning over the South China Sea, birds doing their thing, fishermen minding their nets. And then the sky rips open with a blinding flash aimed straight at America's stealthiest toy. From a hardened Chinese bunker, 142 nautical miles away, an HQ-19 anti-stealth missile screamed skyward at Mach 14, chasing a ghost in the heavens. Alone, B-2 Spirit. If you're picturing a missile movie climax, you're not wrong, except this was real life, and the stakes were a lot higher than popcorn. That missile had less than a minute to do what it was designed for: turn a multi-billion-dollar flying wing into scrap. And yet somehow the universe, and a very slick American pilot with a smug set of countermeasures, had other plans. The HQ-19 detonated yards away in a blinding white flash, harmless. 2 minutes later, diplomats were already dialing lawyers. That little white flash was not just a near miss. It was a diplomatic concussion with echoes that would rattle capitals and kitchens alike. Let's talk about the thing that almost got vaporized: the B-2. There are only 19 of them on the planet. 19. Each one costs about $2.1 billion, which makes them less airplane and more strategic heirloom. They aren't the sort of thing you replace at the corner mall when they get nicked. These flying stealth platforms carry tens of thousands of pounds of precision ordnance and are literally built around the idea of not being seen. So when one of these phantoms gets pinged, it's not a mechanical hiccup. It's a national-level heart attack that forces a room full of very serious people to ask what response looks like and how fast someone is willing to press the button labeled consequences. It's the geopolitical equivalent of catching someone reaching for your expensive watch across a crowded table. Rules of engagement. When a warning becomes a declaration, and from message to muscle in hours, the legal plumbing matters. The B-2 was in international airspace. That's not a footnote that diplomats gloss over with a cough. It's the whole paragraph. Shooting at an aircraft there doesn't get filed under oops or rogue operator. Under international law and US rules of engagement, an unprovoked strike on an American military plane is treated like aggression. Someone with authority had to decide, quickly and deliberately, whether to respond and how to do so without turning a tense moment into a global inferno. Washington decided on calibrated, not catastrophic. 6 hours after the flash, Operation Iron Dagger was greenlit. This wasn't a political punchline. It was surgical choreography, a mission built to send one simple message: don't test the limits of our air power and expect a shrug. The execution read like a dark opera where every note was a missile and every instrument clandestine. From the flight deck, FA-18 Super Hornets vomited ADM-160 mall decoys that didn't just distract. They staged an identity crisis for enemy radars. Hundreds of phantom signatures lit up air controllers' screens. Big, slow, obvious things screaming B-52, while the real threat slipped in wearing a stealth tuxedo. EA-18. Growlers laid down an electronic fog so thick it could be hung on a coat rack. Communication scrambled, target assignment stalled, coordination dissolved into static. F-35s performed the modern equivalent of silent hunting, distributed aperture systems turning the heavens into an augmented reality overlay, and anti-radiation missiles poised like impatient bouncers at a club. Any radar that shouted, "I see you," would be invited, politely but permanently, to go quiet. The B-2s threaded a needle. At 31,000 to 35,000 feet, whisper quiet engines. A radar cross-section measured in the microscopic, more ghost than jet. KC-46 tankers dangled fuel like lifelines, so these phantoms could loiter, surge, and commit without the faintest whiff of desperation. Meanwhile, AI-guided drone swarms surged to overwhelm point defenses. Think of them as 1,000 tiny annoyances that make human decision timelines implode. The plan hinged on integration: decoys from one axis, jamming from another, stealth slipping through the seams like a pickpocket at a carnival. When calibration becomes art, the JDAMs do the math. Hardened, GPS-guided and surgically precise, the bombs did what they were built to do: punch through radar domes, cleave concrete, and turn missile sites into geological features. The HQ-19 launchers, designed to hunt stealthy platforms, went from operational to souvenir in under 90 seconds. Secondary detonations from propellant and munitions turned stored fuel into an unwanted fireworks display nobody had bought tickets for. The physical effect was immediate: twisted launchers, a snapped radar mast, a hardened command bunker reduced to an ugly crater. Dollars were gone, hundreds of millions of cutting-edge kit. But the real currency spent was reputation. Publicly visible humiliation is hard to underwrite, and in geopolitics, optics are a kind of currency that doesn't depreciate. The political ripple did what ripples do: it spread. The president's address was crisp, pointed, and backed up by satellite images and radar logs. Clear evidence, clear legal footing, clear message. Allies leaned in, public statements of support rolled out, and partners quietly breathed a little easier. Deterrence suddenly felt less theoretical and more concrete. Beijing scrambled, literally and figuratively. Mobile batteries shuffled inland. Radar frequencies changed, and intelligence analysts rewrote blueprints to plug the seam that had been exposed. Markets hiccuped, then shrugged. Traders prefer a precise, bounded strike to ambiguous escalation. Weird human habit of craving a contained narrative in chaotic times. On the tactical level, the strike opened a temporary corridor of maneuverability. Carrier groups, surveillance drones, and patrol aircraft could operate with a reduced threat landscape for a window of time. That window was valuable and fragile. Whoever controls it needs to exploit it immediately. Resupply, intelligence collection, and diplomatic signaling don't wait around for committee meetings. Underneath the spectacle, the human story was quieter and, in its way, more heroic. On Guam, crews watched B-2s taxi back like exhausted phantoms, engines cooling, systems humming as if nothing had happened. Because to the world, it did look routine. And that's the point. Pilots and maintainers executed a ballet of logistics. Tankers timed down to the minute. Stealth maintenance performed in the shadows. Weapons loaded under sterile protocols. And command nets humming with secure chatter. For airmen and sailors involved, the mission was professional excellence, married to high stakes. Training, redundancy, and nerves of steel weren't optional extras. They were survival tech. Families watching the news were reminded that global chess games are played by people who drink coffee at 0300 and make impossibly tight windows of time look easy. Strategically, the Scarborough Exchange rewrote memos in capitals. Hardware can be replaced, launchers lifted, and radars re-erected, but reputations are sticky. Allies took notes, adversaries recalculated posture. Procurement meetings acquired new urgency, and budget lines suddenly sprouted to patch the revealed vulnerabilities. The long game is a weird mixture of metal and will. You can replace RODOMs, but political capital and deterrence calculus are ephemeral and costly to rebuild. The strike showed, bluntly, that visibility is power. How much you can see, or how much the other side thinks you can see, shapes choices. When perception and capability align, outcomes change fast. Let's be honest, this episode also rewired some regional equations. For littoral states, the incident wasn't just trivia to argue over at diplomatic dinners. It was a practical reminder that control over sensor networks and anti-access/area denial systems matters, both for defense and for signaling. Navies adjusted patrols, air forces tweaked routes, and intelligence communities updated contingency maps. The tactical win bought a window. Use it for operations, show the flag, move supplies, gather signals intelligence, and demonstrate alliance cohesion. But windows close. They don't come with hinges. If you sit on your hands and let bureaucracy creep in, the political leverage evaporates. Smart militaries exploit short-term tactical success to buy long-term strategic positioning. Slow ones watch the weather change. There's a pedagogical angle too. In classrooms where strategists teach officers, this incident will be a case study for years. On the endurance of stealth, the multiplier of joint operations, and the bluntness of political will. First lesson: stealth still matters. It's not magic, but when married to timing and integrated electronic warfare, it flips scenarios from probable disaster to manageable victory. Second lesson: an orchestra beats a soloist. Deception, jamming, precision strike, tanking, and drones are not independent toys. They are instruments in a score. Finally, political will is the conductor. Hardware without the willingness to act leaves capability as shelfware. Decisiveness turns capability into credible deterrence. But every victory creates incentives. Adversaries will study the raid, iterate, and invest. Mobile launchers will go deeper, radars will evolve, and new countermeasures will be pushed into budgets. Diplomats won't stop negotiating, and engineers won't stop designing. That's the arms diplomacy treadmill. Every demonstration provokes a response. Every exploitation invites hardening. The immediate advantage is temporary. The strategic contest endures. The Scarborough Exchange is another chapter in a long story where each side learns, adapts, and tests limits again. So what should you, the viewer, take to your own mental arsenal? First, modern conflict is about information and perception as much as metal and fire. Who sees what when matters? Sometimes more than who shoots faster. Second, integrated capabilities, air, sea, cyber, electronic warfare, multiply each other. Third, never underestimate the political variable. Hardware is a tool. Will is the wielder. When tech, timing, and resolve line up, outcomes can be decisive and fast. When they don't, ambiguity breeds risk. If you want the parts that make pilots grin and engineers nerd out, JDAM penetration math, the B-2's stealth trade-offs, distributed aperture systems on the F-35, or how electronic warfare turns radars into unreliable narrators. Tell me, and I'll drop a tech deep dive. We'll diagram trajectories, compare trade-offs, and poke at the engineering choices that made the mission possible. There's a whole ecosystem of tiny, brilliant hacks behind a headline like this, and yes, it's as geeky and thrilling as it sounds. Hit like and subscribe if you want that teardown. Drop Tech Deep Dive in the comments so I know you're hungry for the nuts and bolts episode.